tiny. I feed them about maybe once every other day or once a day. Just a little tiny cupful of those. And like most frogs, like everybody thinks of the tongue coming out. And dart frogs are really cool because they do have that feature where they stick out the tongue really fast. I don't know if you guys have seen them doing that at all. Have they been out and about for you guys most of the time? Yeah? Yeah, okay. You guys are really quiet. Yeah. So this frog right here, I'll clean off the glass. Maybe that's the problem too. I'll clean off the glass a little bit.
I was going to ask you too, Nate, if at the end, before you conclude, maybe if I could have them come up by rows and get a closer look, would that be all right?
Absolutely. Now this frog right here, this is a very special frog to me right here. They call this the Azurius, Dendrobates azurius, or the blue and black poison dart frog. This is my favorite frog, and this is what got me into the hobby. Just the fact that it's blue. I mean, it looks alien-like. It looks so cool compared to most frogs. This is actually one of the most popular frogs on the market, and it's actually one of the cheapest as well, because so many people have it. However, so many people like it just because of the fact that it's blue. People come over to my house and they see the frogs, the first thing they go to is the blue ones. They don't go to the most expensive one, they don't go to the tiniest one, they go to the blue one. Now, I also like the Phyllobates terribilis, just the fact that it is the most deadly vertebrate in the world. I mean, that's cool enough as it is. You know, just that you have something in your collection that is one of the most deadly animals in the world, okay? So the other thing I want to talk to you about is how I raise my tadpoles. Right now, my brother was asking me, I have about 40 to 50 tadpoles that I'm raising up right now. And this is from all my frogs that lay their eggs and they go through the tadpole stage and stuff like that. I'll talk to you about how they breed. It's really interesting how they breed. So I don't have any of the cocoa huts in there right now, but so what they do, does anybody know what breeding is? You guys aren't aware of what breeding kind of means? Shake some heads, maybe say yes. Anybody know? Because breeding is basically how they make other froglets, okay? How the frogs make other froglets. Now they have a really cool way. This is one of the coolest things about poison dart frogs is they have really cool calls and they have really cool breeding activity that goes on. It's not like some mammals that you've seen like dogs and cats. It's very different. So what typically happens is that the male, typically the male will start giving out a call, okay? And all dart frogs have different calls. Some are really loud, some are really like a buzz, really quiet. Okay, so the male will give out a call saying, basically, I'm ready to breed. The female will then chase or get ready and start to chase the male around, and she'll start to rub the back of the male. And what that's doing is signifying, yes, I'm ready to breed, let's go breed and make other froglets. At that point, they'll go into, and when I have them in captivity, what they'll do is they'll go into a thing. This is a coconut cut in half, little cocoa hut. And underneath that, I put a little petri dish. This is like what scientists would use to raise little DNA and things like that. They'll have different things there. I just put that down in their tank, and I put that over there. And so they feel safe, and they feel like that's a moist place to lay. And then after a couple, maybe a day or two, I'll go and check to see if there's eggs, and I pull it up, and typically there's eggs in there. Sometimes there's not, though. That's typically the mating ritual. Now, every frog has a little bit different variation. Some of the smaller frogs, they have a more interesting one that it deals with more of the plants and they don't lay typically on cocoa huts. It's a little bit harder to breed. So another area they might breed would be a plant that's very popular amongst thumbnail species. I say thumbnail species because they are literally as small as your thumbnail for their entire life. They're really tiny, but they have really cool calls. And this is a bromeliad, okay? These are found up in the trees, maybe 30, 40, 60 feet up in the air. And these little frogs will be up in the trees, and what they'll do is they'll start that mating process. They'll start calling, and the female will go, oh, there's someone calling for me. And they'll start interacting that way. And what they'll do is they'll lay the eggs on the end of the bromeliad axil right here, okay? After that, the process isn't over for mom and dad, okay? Some of the dart frogs, they'll raise up their young all the way. They don't just drop them off. So after the tadpoles hatch out of that egg sac, the mom or the dad, in different species are different, I'm not going to go into specifics there, they'll come up and they'll get one of those tadpoles and put it on their back. And I actually have a picture of a frog that does that. All dart frogs typically do it, but this one's a really cool one. If you see on its back, what looks almost like what my brother would say looks like a loogie or a booger on the back. Okay? That right there is about 12 tadpoles on the back of a mom or dad, I'm not sure. And what she'll do or he'll do is carry them to water so that they can actually survive in the water, okay? Now, what some species do is they actually take one individual tadpole and they'll drop it off in a bromeliad. If you look in there, there's a little cavern, a little pit, and there's water always inside there. So what they'll do is they'll drop the tadpole off in there, and then they'll constantly feed that tadpole until it turns into a full froglet. the mother will drop off an infertile egg, and that's what the tadpole eats for the rest of its tadpole life, and it turns into a froglet, and now it's on its own. So that's how they survive. Not all dart frogs survive though. Okay, so they may lay like 6 eggs and only 2 will survive out of the entire clutch. Okay, so some dart frogs aren't so lucky. And then what I do on the species that I care for, I can do it on my own. I don't have to have the frogs do it. So what I'll do is I'll pull these eggs out from the tank. I put them in a humid environment, moist. You have to have moisture in there. If you don't, the eggs will dry out. Put it into a moist environment. And then I feed the tadpoles for approximately 2 to 3 months. I feed them little algae and spirulina. This is what you would feed fish, little bacteria and algae and stuff like that. And then I also feed them little frog tadpole bites, okay? Now, if you can see, I'll let you guys come up at the end, but I'll give you, I'll let you see this one. This one is actually just came out 2 days ago. I just put this in the water. So it's a very tiny tadpole. This one, however, came out a while ago, and it's popped its back legs. So I don't know if you guys can see how big it is. So it's still got the long tail, things like that. They pop their back legs first, and then the front legs they'll pop at the very end. And once they pop the front legs and the back legs, they're ready to come out of the water. What we say is they come out of the water. And so that's what I have these 2 little guys right here. In this cup right here, I have it tilted, and there's some water in there. And there's 2 tadpoles in there that are getting ready to be froglets. They still have the tail, but they have all 4 legs. So I tilt this just a little bit so that you have a dry area and you have a wet area, so that when these frogs are ready to come out of the water, they can breathe. Because once they become a frog, they can't stay underwater. They can't breathe. So they have to come out to breathe. When they're a tadpole, they have to stay underwater. They're not out of the water. So that's what these guys are getting ready. Maybe in about 2 days, their tail will fully disappear, and they'll no longer be that tadpole anymore. They'll be a full froglet. So that's where these guys are. And I'll let you guys come up at the end a little bit to look at that. The other thing I missed out, I'm sorry I'm a little scattered here, with frogs and some other reptiles too, you have to feed them vitamins. You guys know what vitamins are, minerals, right? You have to eat bananas, apples, vegetables, all that stuff, right? Well, that's what I do for my frogs. I put on a powder on these flies. And this is just a calcium powder with vitamin D3 and things like that. And that's how they get their vitamins, because without that, they wouldn't have proper bone growth. They wouldn't grow right. So when you take them out of the wild and put them in captivity, there's some things you have to take into account of what you're going to do to make them survive in captivity, because not all reptiles and amphibians are so easy to keep, and sometimes you have to do certain things to make sure that they're surviving in captivity. Now, remember I talked to you guys about the cool calls? This is one of my favorite parts. I'm going to show you the call of this guy right here, the Phyllobates terribilis, the most poisonous vertebrae in the world, okay? One of my favorite calls. Well, first, what do you guys think of when you hear frog calls? Do some frog calls for me if you can. Don't be embarrassed. Wow. So, my frogs, I can assure you, none of the poison dart frogs sound rabbit or rabbit. They don't do that. It's a lot more cooler than that. So I'm going to show you 2 different calls. One is not so loud and one is very loud, okay? First is the Phyllobates terribilis, okay? What's that sound like to you guys? What's it remind you of? Some people have said dolphin.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I kind of think it's a dolphin. It sounds like a dolphin, but it's not. It's actually this guy. So what they'll do is they'll get up. These guys are so cool to watch because they get up and they'll stand really like they're ready to fight almost. And then they start calling, and their little vocal sac underneath will start to get really big, and it'll vibrate. So you'll see them vibrate in the cage. It's really cool. Now I'm going to show you a call from these guys, Dendrobates tinctorius azurius, okay? These guys are cool too, but their call, don't cover your ears, don't worry. This is a very buzzing, low-sounding call that you can hardly hear if you're actually by the tank. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Okay, listen very carefully. Pretty boring, huh? Yeah. So that's the spectrum right there. It goes from really loud to very quiet. And that's actually louder than what they really sound like. I'll be in my room at night reading or something, and all of a sudden I'll hear a and I'm like sitting there and I look over my tank and go, I think they're calling, I'm not quite sure, maybe. And so you can barely hear those ones, but there's other ones that sound really even more unique than the terribilis. Everybody has their own preference. There's some guys in the hobby that like some calls and some don't. So it ranges there. Let me make sure I haven't missed out anything else. Reading. And again, I'll have you guys come up at the end. I think I have some time.
Oh, yeah, you got a lot of time.
Yeah, a lot of time.